Here we go. We're back at it. Another day, another problem, and still no solutions. I'd like to propose to you some different things today in our conversation. The language that we use to describe our problems is important. I'm hearing words being inserted into this police brutality issue that I find are overstating the situation. Rest in peace to George Floyd. Rest in peace to the hundreds and hundreds of people over the years who have died in this gruesome and horrific manner. I mean that. I am not a proponent of killing black people. I'm not a proponent of anyone killing black people. I do believe that black lives matter. I do. What's the word I want to start off with today? Genocide. There's a genocide happening in the black community. The police are executing a genocide. I've heard it from multiple different avenues. A genocide. Well, what is a genocide? According to the Oxford Dictionary of English, the deliberate killing of a large group of people, especially those of a particular ethnic group or nation. Genocide. Do you believe the police are executing a genocide against black people? That's the question I'm posing to you. Don't let Twitter and social media and the news and the newspapers form your opinion. Arm yourself with information. Let me read to you a little bit, just a little bit, of true examples of genocide. Rwanda, 100 days of slaughter. In just 100 days in 1994, about 800,000 people were slaughtered in Rwanda by ethnic Hutu extremists. They were targeting members of the minority Tutsi community, as well as their political opponents, irrespective of their ethnic origin. Now, I'd just like to point out that both of those groups were black. The Hutus and the Tutsis were both black. From the same region. 800,000 dead in 100 days. Read the articles. The information is there. They killed children, men, women, mostly with machetes. They removed limbs. They slaughtered people ruthlessly and without hesitation. That's an example of genocide. I'm going to read you some World War II numbers. Please go back and look at Rwanda on your own time. Battle deaths in World War II were about 15 million. These were soldiers from 41 different countries, thereabout. The battle wounded 25 million. Civilian deaths, 45 million people. The soldiers died 15 million. The soldiers were injured 25 million. You and me, the moms, the grandpas, the children, the babies, the whites, the blacks, the gays, 45 million. Germany had about 5 million and a half, just over that, military deaths. Their total death was between 6.6 and 8 million. That includes the military, so the civilians were those additional numbers. These are numbers on a page. These were human lives that were lost, that were extinguished. And a lot of time in a gruesome, horrific fashion. There's about 41 nations who lost people during World War II. Just to give you an example of one of the most prevalent nations that we know about through the historical record was Poland. They had about 240,000 military deaths. Total deaths, 5.6 million. Less than 300,000 military soldiers who signed up to fight to defend their nation of Poland, less than 300,000 of those men died. 5.6 million Polish citizens died in total. Do some research. And you can read about it. There's so many documentaries that you can watch where you can see video footage of human beings being herded on trains and murdered and slaughtered, children being starved, being extinguished in an industrial fashion. That's genocide. That's genocide. Is what we're experiencing right now with the police genocide? Well, I don't know what the numbers are, but we're going to learn together. I would just like to point out that the white population as of 2019 census, the percentage is 76.5%. The black population percentage as of 2019 census is 13.4. 76, 13. White 76%, black 13. Yet and still, 1,300 more black people were murdered just the year before. 1,300 more black people were murdered. Now, the Washington Post, it's a prominent newspaper in our country. Some people like it, some people don't. Since 2015, they has been taking a log of all police shootings in the United States. You can look it up yourself. You can find the names, you can find the case files, you can find the witnesses, the statements, everything that's involved. What we know is, as of 2019, 9 or 10, depending on the evidence, it's 9 or 10, you choose yourself. In 2019, black unarmed people were killed by the police. And they also categorize unarmed in a very wide range. In one of these cases, why it's 9 or 10, the suspect fled the scene from being pulled over and ran in the woods, was fighting with the police officer. He was shot. When they went back to the vehicle, the gun was in the car. He had a weapon. He left it behind when he fled the vehicle, but he was unarmed at the time. 10. Now, let's just, for the sake of argument, say that all 10 of those people were exactly like Mr. George Floyd, that they were 100% innocent, that the police officer had no reason to shoot them or kill them. 10. Out of 13% of the population, 10. Is that a genocide? I don't believe that that word is appropriate. Now, when you look at the cases, you can determine and judge whether or not those were righteous kills. There is such thing as a righteous kill. If someone comes onto my property and tries to harm my family, I'm going to shoot them. That is a righteous kill. If I go onto your property and try to kill you, that is not a righteous kill. So when you look at the case, individual cases, you can decide and choose, but I'm willing to concede that. Let's just, for the sake of argument, say that all 10 of those people were 100% innocent. Is 10 people in a calendar year, when we make up 13% of the population, you want to call that a genocide? When 800,000 people were killed in Rwanda in 100 days? Less than a third of a year. When 5 million people were slaughtered in Poland. And you can watch it on video. You can see the mass graves of the babies and the women and the old people, the disabled, homosexuals, Jehovah's Witnesses, gypsies, whatever. If they didn't want you, you were killed. Systematically killed. 10 people. Let's talk about some other facts. Blacks die of homicide at a rate of 6 times the rate of whites and Hispanics combined. Blacks die of homicide at a 6 times rate of whites and Hispanics combined. We're 13% of the population. Whites are 76, not including the Hispanic population. And we are murdered, die of homicide 6 times more than them. You are at risk. Every day, I am at risk. Every day. But who are we at risk from? The police? 10 people? Blacks commit homicide at a rate of 8 times the rate of whites and Hispanics combined. We commit homicide at a rate of 8 times of whites and Hispanics combined. We are killing somebody, and somebody's killing us. 10 people. I want to stay here for a minute. You know, I believe that I am a freedom fighter. I believe that we are enslaved. Currently, right now. What's the definition of slavery? Slavery, the state of being a slave, a condition compared to that of a slave in respect of exhausting labor or restricted freedom. The practice or system of owning slaves, the condition of a slave, bondage. The keeping of slaves as a practice or institution, a state of subjection, like that of a slave. How are we slaves? We are slaves of the mind. We are enslaved with our thoughts. Someone has got you riled up. I am not a slave. My mind is free. I navigate the fields of information at will. I do not entrap my mind by the masters who provide you information and ridicule you for thinking outside of the thought plantation that they have created. Your mind is in chains, my brother. I don't give a damn about right or left. Somebody is lying to us. And I would recommend that we free our minds and explore those fields of information so that we may combat the masters of this thought slavery. I would like to be your Frederick Douglass of the mind. Why do I say that? No one's telling you these numbers. No one that you want to listen to. There are people talking about it, and the information is there. But when you turn on the television, these numbers are not being broadcast to you. When you open your Twitter feed, these numbers are not being put in your face. You see it every day. Depending on where you live, you see it every day. You see what the streets look like on a regular basis. But the lies are being told at such a rapid pace. The cloud and fog of ignorance is so thick that you can't see the reality in front of your own face. Why are these people lying to us? You be the judge. The height of the Black Lives Matter movement was in 2015, 2016. Well, what happened then? It was an election year. Black people died in 2017, 18, 19 as well. But it's 2020. And we're locked up on coronavirus. You're not essential. We have to be fearful of this virus. We have to protect ourselves. You're going to die. You're black. But Mr. Floyd is ruthlessly slaughtered on film. Suddenly the coronavirus is irrelevant. And everybody loves you. Everybody wants to defund the police. Defund the police. Defund the police. Who's going to suffer if we defund the police? I just want to know. Is it the people that live in the Hollywood Hills? Is it the people with millions of dollars that have their own private security and weapons galore? Is it the people that fly on private planes? Are they going to suffer when we defund the police? Or is it going to be the average citizen, black, white, or whatever, that is poor? Those are the victims of crime. The type of crime that LeBron James experienced was somebody wrote nigger on his house. That's terrible. Very disrespectful. The type of crime that we experience is getting shot at, getting robbed, getting raped. Mr. James hasn't experienced too much of that in his personal life, I would assume. And I'm glad he hasn't. Defund the police. Another part of the thought slavery. I want to go to slave patrols. Let's read about what a slave patrol was and the practice of slave patrols. Here's the oath that someone becoming a slave patroller would take. I, and he would state his name, do swear that I will, as a searcher for guns, swords, and other weapons among the slaves in my district, faithfully and as I privately can, discharge the trust reposed in me as the law directs, to the best of my power, so help me God. He wants to take away the slaves' guns. He wants to take away the slaves' swords. He wants to take away any weapon he can from the slave to the best of his power. That's from North Carolina in 1828. Organized policing was one of the many types of social controls imposed on enslaved African Americans in the South. Physical and psychological violence took many forms, including an overseer's brutal whip, the intentional breakup of families, deprivation of food and other necessities, and the private employment of slave catchers to track down runaways. Now, this is 1828 and thereafter. Everything is not identical to 2020, but there are some similarities. They wanted to take away the weapons of the slaves. They wanted to commit physical harm to the slaves. We'll touch on that in a moment. Psychological violence, what is that? Thought slavery. To be so fearful of them or something else that would change your behavior. And the intentional breakup of families. They didn't want you to be a family. They wanted to separate you. You see, if you could raise your own child and teach him your own beliefs, that was adversarial to the overseers. Because then you could teach these people in secret what our plan will become to free ourselves, to harm our masters. We outnumber them. We must separate them. Now, how is that similar to today? Well, they're separating us. We've got the house Negro. We've got the field Negro. But we also have abolitionists. The house Negro and the field Negro are both slaves of thought in 2020. And the abolitionist is the one that is being attacked in 2020. Don't free your mind, you're an Uncle Tom. Don't free your mind, you ain't black. Within the last 2 weeks, somebody stood on national television on a black show and said, if you don't do what I want you to do, you ain't black. That's not thought control. Oh, well, it was a mistake. It was a gaffe. Was it? Was the fact that we are burning down 13 cities over at most 10 deaths when there was 7,400 other deaths the year before? Not by the police? But we got to burn down all our cities. We've got to riot. We've got to lay down peacefully in the street. Either way, what were we doing when the 7,400 other people were murdered? I don't know. Not a damn thing. I can go on with the slave patrols. I know that in 2020, our attention span, we don't want to listen to too much talk. We're going to move on. Look up slave patrols and remember that that was in the 1800s and we're in 2020, because I'm going to show you where the thought control comes into play. As of this year, May 25th, there's been 191 homicides in Chicago already. Now, in the previous 365 days, so 365 days before that, we had a total death toll that worked out this way. Black, non-Hispanic, 303 dead in Chicago. Not known, well, I don't know how it's not known. They're not saying 144. By the way, the leading number is the 303 black people. Then you have not known at 144. White, not Hispanic, 55. Hispanic, 15. Asian, 2. Black, Hispanic, Dominican, Cuban, something like that, 1. 303. Previous 365 days. So far this year, 191 dead. Why do they want us to not know this information? Why do they not want us to talk about this? Because we are mentally slaves. You see, they are no longer holding the boot on our throat. They are convincing us every single day to do it ourselves. They have taken away the whip and given it to us. We whip ourselves. We kill ourselves. We beat ourselves. And then when they want to gain something, they show us the one video that they can dredge up of something horrible happening from a white police officer to a black man. They don't broadcast all the other deaths. They don't talk about the little girls who are shot in bed sleeping from a drive-by bullet. They don't talk about that. Because that's not going to help them get what they want. That's not going to help tighten the chains around our mind. They are trying to separate this family of black people from themselves through thought. You see, if we continue to commit this violence to ourselves, they don't need to bother. I still listen to the speeches of Malcolm X today. I listen to them all the time. And if you listen to them in 2020 and believe that you are still living in the times that Malcolm X lived in, you're not doing yourself any favors. You have to listen to his words in the context of this reality. Malcolm X did not live in the same America that we live in. Why do I say that? Well, let me tell you some numbers. And this is a topic that President Obama spoke about in one of his speeches in 2008 on Father's Day in Chicago. He spoke about this. Go back and look it up. Father's Day speech, President Obama, 2008 campaign. He talks about this very topic. I'm not going to repeat his words verbatim. I'm going to give you some raw numbers. What is one way that the patrollers kept the slaves in check? Well, they intentionally separated their families. Do you know that today, in the world that we live in 2020, 72% of our children nationwide, 72%, that's almost 3/4, just a hair under 3/4, that's a majority. That's 75 cents on the dollar, are growing up with just a mom. Just a mom. That daughter does not have a man to look up to learn what to look for. That son does not have a man to set an example for him, to show him how to behave. Those two people who created that child are not filling his mind with their family lineage, with their language, with their beliefs. Somebody else is doing that. And in most cases, the mother is working tremendously hard just to feed her family, to clothe her child, to house her produced being into this world. That's a difficult job. What energy and time does she have to be a mom and a dad after working 10 hours? 72%. In some of the bigger cities, like the Bronx and Milwaukee, it's between 85 and 90. The bigger cities is where we have the majority of these violent problems amongst our people. 85, 90%. We know that you are very, very tremendously likely, and there's an exception to every rule because I was raised by a single mother for the most part, that we're mostly going to wind up dead or in jail or committing violence, and maybe we don't get caught for it. The slave patrollers wanted to separate our families. Somehow, when we're talking about these topics, we're not bringing this up. Why is that? Because we're enslaved in our minds. And these patrollers are separating you from your families. They tell you that it's okay. They tell you that it's good for you. I know what's good for you, boy. Don't be a slave. In the world that Malcolm X lived in, police violence was tremendously higher amongst the black population than it is today. And of course, they didn't keep real great statistics of that because usually people committing crimes don't like to keep a record of it. Going back to World War II just for a second, the people who perpetrated that crime tried to burn all the evidence before we arrived. They don't want to leave the documents that show the amount of people that they killed. We had to dig up the graves. We have to estimate because those files are sealed with fire. But in the world that he did live in, there are some statistics that we can look at. In the 1950s, amongst black families, black children, 78% were married. Two-parent households, 78% in 1950. While we were drinking from separate water fountains, while we were being beaten, while we were being treated terribly by civilians and the government alike, 78% of us decided that we needed to stick together. And 18% of us decided, for whatever reason, those families were separate and it was a female with the child. 78 and 18 or 12. I might have miswrote that. You can look these numbers up. It's not hard to find. In 1960, at the time when Brother Malcolm was at his peak, when he was speaking to those crowds about the ballot and the bullet, when he was speaking to those crowds about the house Negro and the field Negro, 74% of our children had a mom and a dad. They could beat us, but they couldn't separate us. They could spray us with hoses and sick the dogs on us, but they couldn't pull us apart. 22% of us at that time were separate with a mom in the home. The 1970s, it was 68 married, 28 single. The numbers are switching. We're getting more freedom, and we're making different choices. Why is that? Is it because we're so depraved, sick? Or is it because perhaps the system was continuing the old practices with new execution? In the 1980s, when I was born, 56% were married. In Brother Malcolm's time, it was 74%. Almost 3/4. By the 1980s, it was just over half. By the 1990s, it was exactly half that were married with their child. In the world that we live in today, as I said before, the slave patrols, the mental slave patrols, they are succeeding. Because nationwide, we're at 72% single parent household. And in the larger areas where we're more heavily congregated, where there's more restrictions upon our weaponry, we're between 85 and 90% single parent. The world that Brother Malcolm lived in was a different world than we live in today. Listen to his speeches from the light of 2020. I could go on and on and on. But what I'm going to go to now is my new national call to action. And that is a United States, but a truly United States. Where is the state or the land that we control? We live in their United States. We live in their house. We have not been brought into the power structure. They are fighting tooth and nail to control our minds, to make us believe that they can fix the problems that they created and have failed to fix up until this point. The problems in our community, they created them. And they've been promising us since the end of the Civil War that they could find a fix to the problem. We're still having the same problems. You have failed at your mission to fix our house. And America has an obligation to allow us this opportunity so that we might bring our success to the flag and truly unite our states. In order to have a United States, we've got to have a state that we can unite to yours. We're not a United States if all 48 aren't united. If California wasn't a part of the United States, we're not a United State. If Wyoming or Iowa was not part of this nation, we're not united. Well, where is our opportunity to unite with you? Where is our opportunity to be your equal? So that we may sit at the table of power and truly unite our states. We need to start asking different questions. We cannot continue to ask for the same things that Brother Malcolm asked for when he lived in a different set of circumstances. Our circumstances are different, but the results are similar. We are poor. We are dying. We are physically being locked up, in a lot of cases, by the behavior that we are emitting. And every single time that one of the field Negroes tries to free himself, some form of house Negro tells him, don't run away. Don't free your mind. Don't free your mind. We got it good. We got it good. Continue to think the same thoughts. We're going to be fine. Let's just burn shit. Let's be mad because that one guy died, and let's ignore the 7,400 others. Let's ignore the thought slave patrols that are separating our families at an astronomical rate. Let's allow them to come into our neighborhoods and legally disarm us. If you live in a location where firearms are illegal, they are disarming you with the law. Therefore, to be able to protect your family on your own, you must break that law, which is much easier to lock your ass up because now we found you with contraband. The Second Amendment says that a weapon is not contraband, it is your God-given right. Because they want to disarm you, and now they want to convince you to defund the police. Well, what the hell is that going to look like? How are you going to stop the KKK, the white supremacist, the criminal of whatever creed or color, if you are disarmed and there's no one to call that will help you? Are the rich in the hills going to experience the same fate as we? I see that as not happening. They will not experience our suffering as they do not experience it now. The road to destruction is paved with good intentions. I call for all of my brothers to embrace the concept of this land. This is our country. But we do need to make some fixes. And I propose my solution is Black American sovereignty. Give us a star on that flag and make it black. Then we can unite those stars and be brothers in reality. Right now, they want to separate us. Not all. Some do. Open your eyes, clear the fog, and find those individuals and dissociate yourself from them. If they be the house Negro that is black, or if they be the overseer that is white. Free your mind and join me. I'll take all challenges. There's a better way. We are better as blacks, as Americans.